What's happening? This is Cliff Avril, and I am here with my first real estate business partner, Nelia, and she is amazing. She's awesome. We're going to dive into so many different things, but I also don't want this to feel like it's a show. We're going to have a dialogue, but first and foremost, what's going on, Nelia? How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for the intro. And
Yes,
thanks for actually agreeing to be here and to do this podcast with me. And I'm hoping we can deliver a lot of valuable information to our listeners and
for
hopefully
sure.
inspire some of them do real estate.
And that's what we're exactly. And I think that's what this is about. But first, let's talk about kind of how we met, right?
Uh,
Because it's interesting how things come together. I think one of the big things for me, at least, is getting out your comfort zone and making sure that you're letting people know that you're in the real estate space, right?
mhm.
Especially me being a retired athlete, and then I get introduced to you through someone that actually got introduced through the Seahawks, Joe Weitzel, who is our lending broker. Amazing. They do some
Amazing
great
guy.
stuff over there. But I'm gonna let you start off, and then I'll tell you my perspective on how all of us came together. But you've also had some interesting conversations with other folks as well about how we came about, and some of the funny questions that you get.
Yeah. We did get introduced through Joe Weitzel. I know you were in the market to kind of like, you know, shopping around, trying to figure out if you wanted to do real estate. And I know
Mhm.
Joe reached out to me and said, hey, I don't know if we want to go there. So I don't speak football. We're
Yeah,
not like if you guys
which
are
was a
expecting that.
good thing, which was a great thing for me in particular.
If you guys expecting to hear a lot of that, I apologize to all listeners in advance. It'll probably not going to relate much to it, but Joe reached out to me. He says, hey, I got this retired Seahawk athlete I want to introduce you to. His name is Cliff Avril, and he like tippy-toeing around. I'm like, okay, like, what are you trying to say? What does he want to do? So when you called me, I didn't know who you were. Clueless again. Like I said, I
Yeah.
don't watch football. And that evening, I was talking to my kids. I was like, yeah, this retired Seahawk called me. My son goes, what's his name? I said, Cliff Averill, and his eyes like pop up. He's like, what? I'm like, why? What's the big deal? And he goes, that poster in my room, like sign? I'm like, yeah, what about it? He goes, that's Cliff. I'm like, I thought the name sounded familiar.
That's funny.
I walk over to his room. I'm like, yes, that is him. That was him. So that's the extent of how
Hmm.
much I knew of who you were. So I thought that was funny. Um, that was my first introduction. And in terms of, you know, I forgot where the rest of the
No,
question
no, no,
was. I
no,
got
no.
all over the place.
No, no, that's perfect. But it's funny because, and I know for me in particular, like those types of moments are important because now if you're a big fan, you're a big fan. Nothing wrong with that. But I also like genuine relationships where it's just, hey, we're gonna build this relationship based on whatever it is, whatever space we're in, but not based on anything other than that, right? You not knowing I play ball wasn't an issue, wasn't a big deal. I actually liked that, and I think what was cool with us partnering up is, we kind of talked about this a little bit before we got on air, but just being prompt and also showing you that I was serious about this,
Yes.
right? Joe told me a little bit about you and some of the things that you were doing. Obviously this opportunity that our first investment presented itself down in Alabama, and I'm like, man, Alabama, like, why would I do any
What's in
work out? Yeah, what's
Alabama?
out there? And I just remember, and we would text. We're like, once we got contact, we were texting all the time, just talking about different opportunities or whatever. And the one thing I remember Joe saying is like, hey, look, she's a bulldog. She's gonna make things happen. Like she makes things happen. And I was like, okay, well that's cool. And then the Alabama play was more of, it made sense for me because you already had the infrastructure, meaning you had your property managers, you had general contractors, you already knew the landscape, you owned the buildings right around the building that we were
Mm-hmm.
purchasing. So to me, it was a no-brainer. It was just like, okay, well, why wouldn't I want to partner up with her, especially if she has the infrastructure, she wants to teach me, and it all happened kind of organically as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I thought that was really unique. Now we talk about Alabama. We're here in Seattle. Why Alabama? Tell them a little bit. Why Alabama? Why did it make sense for you?
So a lot of my properties were in Washington State before I went out to Alabama, they were mentally and physically actually breaking me down because I was managing them myself. Plus my work, plus being a mom, but like everything on top of it just was
Life.
piling things up. Yeah, life. And my husband and I talked about, investing out of state. And he said, I'm open to that idea. Do the research, figure out where you want to go, and then, we'll see where this takes us. So I think networking is another thing we should talk
Yes.
about today.
Yes.
I used to do meetup classes, and at one of my classes, I had an investor that was a usual person that would come in all the time. Anyways, long story short, he kind of introduced me to that market. He reached out to me one day and said, there is a factory that's being built in Huntsville, Alabama, and we need 5 homes for executives that are moving from Japan. I'm like, time out. Why are Japanese executives moving to Alabama? So then did a little research, and I came home that night, told my husband we're buying 5 homes, and Joe's like, not so fast.
Pump your brakes.
He's like, time out. Let's do a little research. So within a week or two, we flew out. I was able to build a team of real estate agents and just like interviewed a bunch of agents, interviewed a bunch of property managers. I mean, I built that team probably within 3 months. So before you start researching, I think, buying in another area, I think the biggest thing people need to look at is building their team first.
Yes. No, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was gonna ask because I'm in a few different markets myself. I'm in Alabama. I'm also in Chicago, Illinois, and then I'm also I do a few different things here in Seattle, and at least on my journey, I guess my journey. I started off with real estate. My best investment thus far actually is my first piece of property that I purchased, which was my mom's house. I bought my mom's house back in 2010, 2011, something like that. And that house has doubled and some in price, but obviously it doesn't cash flow or anything like that. But just as far as for like understanding real estate and what it can do for you, it's doubled, right? And then when I really got serious about diving deeper into real estate, the first thing I did was I bought a condo here in Renton, Washington, actually. And my whole purpose was I'm going to rent it to players, young players. I was fully furnished. I know exactly what they need. I know their schedule. I'm going to rent one out, and they're going to stay in those. And I bought my first one, and it went well, but I had some hiccups. I bought a condo. They have a rent cap on it, so which is not something I knew I was privy to. I didn't know anything about it, but I feel like my agent should have told me that. You know what I mean? So still kind of mad at him about that, but we'll talk about that later.
It's a lesson.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a rent cap, and so we ended up having to sell the property probably about a year and a half later because neighbors were complaining, oh, there's different tenants in here every 8 months or whatever, So we sold that. Then I got another one. And since then, anyways, I bought 2 more condos, and they're strictly for players. Again, they're seasonal, but, you're able to charge a little bit of a premium because they're fully furnished. And I say all that to say, as far as for my journey, then I'm like, man, this single family stuff is cool, but I feel like you can scale quicker in multifamily. And that's when I started talking to Joe and, networking and different things like that. And then when I got the opportunity to invest with you on this property in Huntsville, which is killing it, it's crushing our team. Shout out to our team down there. They've been killing it.
For sure.
But why real estate for you? Like, what made you want to get into real estate? But then even deeper, what made you go from, okay, I want to look at real estate, but I want multifamily?
For me personally, before I even became a real estate agent, that was my dream, to own real estate, to have passive income and just live off of it, right? I wasn't afraid of the hard work that was involved behind it. Kind of always wanted to do it. Couldn't find the right people to connect with that could guide me in the right direction. That was before I became an agent. So the dream was always in the back of my head. I became an agent in 2007. And then, of course, bank-owned happened. Who was buying bank-owns?
Who's that?
Investors.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
So I, at one point, would have 20 listings on the market, 20 listings in escrow, 20 in my pipeline that are ready to come on the market. So I was like a beast listing agent, like, you know, listing all these vacant properties. And that's how I got introduced to investment world. So I was watching them flip. I was watching them buy and hold. And I'm like, maybe that's who I can learn from. So obviously, naturally, I was their provider. It's a tight-lipped community. I don't know if you
Yeah,
noticed. It's a
yeah.
pretty tight-lipped community.
I have.
But because I was able to provide them all these great deals, they were able to share whatever their knowledge is with me.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I grew my investments. My first one I bought was in 2012. Little duplex down in Renton as well.
So you started off with, I'm going to say multifamily
Right away.
off top. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right away. We started with the duplex. And I sold that duplex 2 years later. With the proceeds of that duplex, I was able to buy a 13-unit complex.
Nice.
I'm like, damn, this game is fun.
Monopoly.
I'm like, hold on a second. I can do what?
That's cool.
So then we bought a fourplex, we bought a triplex. We bought a lot at auction as well. I did one flip. I absolutely hated it. But it was good for me to try it out and see whether or not.
What was bad about flipping?
The stress level involved, you're doing hard money loan, the carrying cost, and I didn't get a permit on some of the work I did. I got bitch slapped for that one. So there was a lot of lessons along the way, but I made $20,000. I went to school and I got paid is what I always say.
Yeah. And that's what I've learned with real estate. And I think this is, and I'll be interested to get your point on this. When it comes down to the real estate piece as well, is there's so many ways to make money in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Whether you talk about flipping, you talk about buy and hold, you talk about, wholesaling. I mean, there's so many sectors and different things like that. And hearing you say, multifamily, you started off with multifamily. Most people start off with, start off kind of how I did, buy a single family, and then you kind of build up from there and you start realizing. I know for me, why multifamily makes sense is because if I have 30 units, 50 units, 58 units, instead of having 58 houses, I feel like that's a lot easier to manage. I don't have 58 roofs. I don't have 58 foundations. I don't, so I feel like that makes more sense. And everybody is in one place. I don't have to drive around the neighborhood and make 58 stops. So I think that plays a big role. But the biggest thing I think with multifamily is, the way you're able to value them, right? It's not based on comps in the area. It's not based on, a little bit, don't get me wrong, it's a little bit on the comp side, but, as you know, in the single family, hey, if this house sold for $300,000, well, and it's a two bed, two bath. Well, the house around the corner is 2 bed, 2 bath is probably going to sell for right around the same price. Multifamily, we kind of dictate that a little bit based on our rents, based on getting our expenses down. And we just did a cash out refi just a few months ago in a crazy market like it was. But because of our team and you, of course, we were able to raise rents way past what our performer was in the first year, and that still allowed us to be able to pull some cash out. Is that a technique that you've worked in the past, or kind of tell me a little bit more on kind of the different techniques that you've actually used in purchasing some of your multifamily?
So I accidentally stumbled upon that technique when I traded my little duplex to a 13-unit complex. It was an estate sale. Estate didn't even know they had that property. There were a bunch of homeless people that moved in for 2 years. Like, they had no clue that place existed. Eventually, I ended up buying it. When I bought it, out of 13 units, I only kept 3 people. Everybody else ended up getting evicted. We're talking, I picked up needles from the yard. It was heavy lifting work, right?
Bad.
Like pulling out weed everywhere, like marijuana. So when I came in, I did heavy lifting. Within 3 months, I was able to rehab the place, fix it up. I paid $450, I think, for that place. We ended up refinancing it within 3 months at $800,000.
Wow!
I was like, smoking what?
This thing really works.
I was like how? It was like printing your own money at the end of the day, right? So then I started doing a little more research, and I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. Like, I'll get in there, I'll do whatever's necessary. So that's how I accidentally got stumbled upon it. I realized that's what value add is. Again, it's a tight-lipped community. People are just not going to go and share with you, like, and hold your hand on how this is supposed to be done. And bought bought a couple other multifamilies here in the area, and then ended up transitioning all my assets to Alabama market.
You didn't do a 1031 exchange on those?
So on that particular one, I did not. I had a couple of homes that I owned as well here. I did do 1031 exchange on
Okay.
those. So I had one home in Kent that I bought without my husband's knowledge. I was like, by the way, sign this. What's this? Oh, you'll be fine.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry, just sign
Trust
it.
me.
Trust me. He shows up. He's like, I hate this home. I'm like, what? How? What? Like, I was just horrified that he didn't like it. 2 years later, so get this. Here's the best part. Again, accidentally stumble upon even better things. Right? The house was bringing $500 a month, $6,000 a year. 2 years later, I had about 190 in equity. Like after all my expenses, like selling, everything was done. I 1031 exchanged it into 30-unit apartment complex.
Wow. Now, was that 30?
From 1 to 30.
Was that 30 in Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice, nice.
And that one is bringing me 150. So from making $6,000 a year, I was able to make my money, make more money in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now I bring $150,000 a year.
But see, that's also the piece between single family and multifamily is just your scalability, right? Being able to just basically do what you just did, right? Being able to go into other markets, because I think the hardest thing to do for any investor is investing in, well, making your first investment, I think, is the hardest one.
Mm-hmm.
But then the second hardest one is most people want to invest in their areas, which is fine, and I think that's a good start. But taking that leap of faith and going to Alabama, I think can be scary. But again, building out your team and making sure that area is what's best for you. I remember when we were going through, our due diligence on our apartment building, a 58 unit. I remember I was like, I don't know if I want to do this deal. I was kind of getting cold feet. You're like, look, man.
I think I said I was going to punch you.
Yeah, you're like, look, man, you're stupid. Basically, you're saying you're stupid if you don't do this deal because all these different factors. And I'm like, but I don't know the market. And but you kept sending me information to make me comfortable in it. Oh, Toyota's about to build this big, they're spending $1 billion on a manufacturing plant. It's the biggest army base out there. You're giving me all these things, and I'm like, at this point, I'm like, I am stupid if I don't invest in this.
I didn't say that.
I am stupid. Well, that's how I took it. You didn't say that, but that's how I took it. But it was like, no, this makes sense. And then, of course, I think going back to what you were just saying, though, on the networking side, like two different people from two different spaces, live not too far from one another, but we would have never known this if we didn't put it out to the world or networking or whatever to be able to even come together to be able to make this thing happen, right? And offline, you were saying, like somebody was saying, especially being here in Seattle, there's a lot of people with a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the question? I'll let you.
So I was asked a couple of days ago, like, why did you partner up with Cliff? Was it like clout chasing you're after? Did you want like exposure? What is it that you're looking for? There's a lot of millionaires out there in Seattle. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that have a lot of money in this area, right? And they always come to me. They always say, like, I'd love to partner up with you, like whatever it is they want to do. But I've never pulled the trigger, never partnered up with anybody other than you. Mm-hmm. Why did you partner up? Is it the Seahawk factor that played into it? It took me 2 days to figure out why. I lost sleep over it. I was like, oh my God, am I that vain? Is that why I did it? But no, I thought about it. And I think I told you earlier also about why I did it is you always showed up when you said you would. Mm-hmm. I remember our first meeting, we'll say 9 a.m., right? On the call, like I'll talk to you at 9 a.m. It was in 9:03. It was in 9:01. It was exactly on the dot at 9 a.m. You called. I was like, okay, you get a few points here. And like when we had our meetings with our, I think, spouses also, like a lot of good questions came up. Everybody felt comfortable with each other. When usually people come to me and they say they want to invest, I don't see the willingness and desire to want to do it. They kind of want to do it, but they don't show up for that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
That's the difference.
And I think that's funny that you say that because those things played a role for you, but the same thing for me, right? Like I'm paying attention to those things too. It's like, okay, is she very prompt on like as far as for meeting on time? I mean, we meet monthly, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're always on time. If we need to adjust or whatever, well, we communicate, days in advance or whatever it may be. So I'm going to say professional, for lack of better words, but I was doing the same thing. I was paying attention. Okay, when she says we're going to meet at this time, let's see what it is. Okay, I'm going to also ask questions that I also know the answer to see where she's at from an information base as well, too, right? So there was a lot of that going back and forth, and I think for us, what makes it really cool and allows us to kind of have this partnership, but also hopefully, we can do some more deals together is, there's no ego involved there. Yes, you know a little bit more than me, but you're also willing to pass that information over, which was one of the big things for me is whoever I partner with, I want to be able to learn from as well. So, just your information and your knowledge obviously plays a big role. And then to add on to that, is we're doing the whole Freddie Mae and Freddie and Fannie loans, and it's hard to get into that investor, like to be able to be a part of that unless you've done deals already, right? Or you get grandfathered in or whatever case may be. And us being able to do this deal together also allows me now to be able to go get those types of loans now as well. So it was just a combination of different things, but I think it's extremely important for us to understand and know this, because I think there's a notion for people, it's like, man, they don't want us to be able to invest in these things. Like, no, I think it's one of those situations. Once you learn the rules, you play by them and you try to execute. And me being able to, again, partner up with you, it just happened to work out that I'm able to get these types of loans now based on you already having exposure in those spaces. But I think it's unique, and I like our partnership because you're kind of, I say this all the time, is like in this situation in particular, you're like our asset manager essentially, right? You manage the property managers and different things like that, and then every month we come together and we meet, we talk through things, talk about issues, talk about things we want to do, updates, upgrades, whatever it may be, and then you're like the quarterback, which is the person that gets the ball every play.
There's got to be a story.
Which you're like the quarterback, which is the person that directs traffic and
that I know.
gets us down the field, right? And you're really good at it. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you. It's interesting. I was talking to Keisha the other day. Some of the vacancies that we're running into, like, I notice we have a great team. Don't get me wrong. They do an amazing job, but sometimes we fall behind and we try to figure things out with the vacancies that we just currently had. I called her up on Friday. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Why are we still lagging? And she says, I'm really trying hard. I'm sending all these applications. People are just not sending them back to me. And I'm sitting there rattling my brain. I'm going, what the hell are we doing wrong? I was like, wait a minute. Why don't we try a different angle? Bring them in, show them the unit, have those applications printed, give it to them on site, have them fill it out, right there, and now you got your application. And it was so crazy because that's actually the system that I've used in the past. I just didn't follow my own advice for the longest time.
And that's part of it too, right? Let's talk about. They say it's passive, right? They say investing in real estate can be passive. You can be hands off. You could travel the world, all these different things, which can become a thing, but you have to have the systems in place, right? So systems in place. When I think about systems, and I'll let you kind of talk about it, but when I think about systems and people that you need to have on your team, I think you need to have a property manager. I think you need to have a property manager that also, has good contractors and different things like that. And you got to see how big their team is to be able to hopefully scale with them. I also think, for newbies like myself, I guess, over the last few years, you got to have someone that's very well versed, an asset manager of some sort, to one, direct traffic, because you don't think about an asset manager when you have a property manager, but you need somebody to manage the managers too. You know what I mean? Especially when you're from a distance or whatever. I'm trying to think, who else would you need on your team?
A real estate agent,
a broker,
attorney,
a lending broker.
Lending, yeah.
Who else? I'm trying to think.
CPA.
Definitely got to have a CPA. Got to make sure your taxes are right.
Oh, you're gonna be, yeah.
Or you're gonna be in a lot of trouble. But also to be able to take advantage of all the real estate stuff. We just did a cost seg on the same property that we on the same property that we just refinanced, and I want to say we got about $600,000
In credits.
in tax credits. Like, that's amazing. And talk a little bit about that and how that helps you as a person that still has a W-2.
So I'm still learning the
Yeah.
whole thing about cost segregation. I think you and I both kind of discovered it at the same time, and it was funny. It was the same company we were going and
Yep.
talking about. I'm still learning, but for those of you for the listeners that don't know what it is, you depreciating, with the assets, you can depreciate them. I believe it's 27 and a half years over the life of the span of the building. And we're depreciating usually your depreciation is your roof, your appliances, your usual stuff.
I think it's everything but land.
Right.
Yeah.
So with cost segregation, I flew out there, and I just curiosity more than anything for me. They depreciate every light bulb, every nail, every tree, every bush in your yard. I mean, it was amazing amount of details that they went into. So for those of you that have real estate, for our listeners in their back pocket, I would strongly recommend looking into doing cost segregation.
Yes, and if I'm remembering correctly, I think with the cost seg, it's kind of it's winding down. So like last year was your last year of being able to get 100%. This year I think it's 80%, 60%, and it kind of works its way. They're phasing it out. So like last year we were able to get 100%. I'm trying to do one on one of my properties now. We'll be able to do 80%. Obviously, it's not as good as 100%, but it's better than nothing.
Better than
right?
nothing.
And I think being able to offset, whatever your cost seg and tax credits that you're able to get, you get to offset that against whatever you make from your W-2 or whatever job that you have. And you end up, that's how you hear, Trump and all these guys talking about they don't pay any taxes. That's how they don't pay. That's how they don't pay taxes, is they offset their stuff with the real estate, and the money that they actually earn is tax free. And so I'm a big believer is like, people complain like, oh, such and such doesn't pay taxes. I'm like, I need to learn how he doesn't do that and doesn't go to prison for it. Oh, he's doing it legally too. So if there's why wouldn't you look into that? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And figure out how to be able to mitigate, because I don't care where you're at in life. I don't care if you're working, a 9 to 5 at a place that you hate to, being an exec somewhere. Your biggest expense in life is going to always be taxes.
Yeah.
So if you can mitigate them, why wouldn't you? You know what
Exactly.
I mean? And so I'm big on that. And I know you had a couple of things that you wanted to ask.
I do, actually. I'm curious. We're going to take it a little bit the other direction. I know as an athlete, you work 7 days a week?
Pretty much. You got one day off. You get Tuesdays off, quote unquote off, but you're usually in there trying to recover.
And what's your day like?
So
6 a.m.-ish?
6 a.m. to about 6 p.m. 6 a.m. to about 6 p.m., 6:30.
Because, the only thing we see is like you guys
on
show
Sunday.
up. Like,
Exactly.
oh, Sunday, yay, let's go. But it's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scene that we don't usually see. So you're 6 days a week, 7 days a week, constantly on the go, don't see your family probably a lot, right?
Not much during the season.
It's a lot of dedication, and then, at any point you can blow your knee and
yes,
things can happen.
Yep, you're one play away from your career being over with.
Do they set you up for all these, like, what if that happens? Like, you got to look at other avenues and keep your options open.
Well, yes and no. So the NFL is just like any other corporation. And when I say that, it's like Microsoft, it's like Boeing. They don't necessarily think it's their business to tell you what to do with your money, which is fair to a certain degree. But now you're dealing with 20-year-olds, you're dealing with 21-year-olds, right? So a little guidance would be helpful. But again, I played in the NFL for 10 years. I still don't think it's necessarily their job to tell us everything, because again, no other corporation really does that. But I do think it is very important for them to put things in place to be able to help you, which they have done a good job of. I will say that, but it's not known by the athletes. And then also, again, you got to remember, guys are 22, 23, 24 years old. The same reason we got the same things that got us to the NFL usually is our detriment, is a detriment to us. And what I mean by that is being very confident, right? You got to be confident in understanding that, this thing is hard, but I'm going to make it. Like, And the problem becomes when person comes and speaks to us and tells you, hey, the average is less than 3 years. Most of us, 90% of us in that room are thinking, well, that's not going to be me. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of what got us that far. But again, I want to say majority, the average lifespan is less than 3 years in the NFL. But again, the cockiness, I'm going to say cockiness for lack of better words, but the same type of thing that got you that far usually ends up being, the confidence is usually what ends up hurting you because you're not listening to the message that they're telling you. So it's tough, but they do put things in place. There are classes. Heck, I've been taking classes since my 6th year in the NFL. Like every offseason, I would take some sort of financial class, some sort of real estate class, media, whatever it was. I was trying a bunch of different things because I just wasn't sure what else I would want to do outside of football because I had been doing football basically my entire life.
So why real estate?
Man, so real estate, I think real estate for me, is because when I moved here to Seattle, I've been blessed to meet billionaires, like guys that, own these crazy companies that have done some really cool things in the tech space and whatever other space. All of them have always owned real estate. And I'm like, oh, you own real, like why? And they would tell me these words and they would tell me why. I didn't understand it because I wasn't in that space, but they, whether it's tax reasons or whatever, and I didn't understand it. But then as I started getting older and I started diving deeper into the reason, it was because of all the tax advantages. And I wish I would have known more about this when I played because I probably could have saved a couple more dollars, but that was consistent. And so when I retired, and I was trying to figure out different ways of doing things. And then, of course, you got the tax benefits, but then you have the cash flow. I wanted to create cash flow for myself. I didn't want to be dependent of what the market does, the stock market and different things like that do. I didn't want to just be dependent of my financial advisor as well. I wanted to create for myself. And real estate was the best avenue to be able to do so. And also I get to control my own time too.
Gotcha. Now, what's the biggest shock to you, or if there was one, in real estate?
That all these gurus tell you that you don't need any money to start. I think that it can become passive, but initially there's nothing passive about real estate. It's a lot of work,
right?
Yeah, it's a lot of hands-on work. It's it can be passive, but what I've learned is the more passive, and this isn't anything in America, I guess, but the more passive you are in something, the less your returns will be, because everybody else that's actually working day to day, your asset managers, all these people that are working, they got to get paid too, right? So their money is coming out of what you could have made. So for me, it's more of, okay, the less passive it is, meaning the more work I'm putting into it, the more my returns will be as well, right? So that I think that would be the biggest thing, is understanding the more passive you are, the less your returns will be.
Because you've done syndicate, right? Where
I've
you
done
were part
syndications.
of a syndicate. You're just passive investor.
Exactly. And so I would do syndications, which a syndication is basically someone has an asset, has a property, and they need investors to invest in it, right? And they'll guarantee you a 6% return, cash on cash on your money, 7%, whatever it is. They'll tell you that that's what you'll get. And, when you start looking through it, you're like, oh, okay, cool, this looks good. But then there's fees after fees after fees. And you're like, wait up. So I just made 6% on my money. But if I would have did this myself, I could have probably made 15, 16, 17%, maybe even 20%. So that's when, everything started kind of clicking for me, is just getting an understanding of the fee structure. But then also, again, there's nothing passive about it, but you'll make more the more you're in it.
Right. So you did a little bit of single family. You did a little bit of multifamily. You played with both, right? What's your preferred?
Oh, multifamily, 1,000%. Going back to what I said earlier, is instead of having 30 single family homes, which actually gets hard to finance because I think you can only go up to 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
So then you got to get super creative and different things like that. You don't have those types of restrictions when you're in multifamily. I think it's just easier to handle. Again, instead of having 30 roofs, you have one roof with 30 people, that 30 families or units that are there, right? You don't have 30 foundations you have to deal with. So all those things I think play a big role. And then again, going back to it is you control the value of your building a little bit more than just basing it on what the comps are.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's a lot of people might not be familiar with the concept. They don't know what that means probably.
Yeah.
A lot of people bet on appreciation. Like, I'm going to buy, hope for the best. Yay, market's going to go up.
Yeah, I don't believe, I feel like that's speculative investing. Right? That's speculative investing. If you're just waiting on appreciation, and don't get me wrong, people have made a lot of money based on that, but I like the for sure thing. Yeah, I mean, I like being able to control it a little bit more. So with going back to it, single family properties are valued based on their comps in the area, the comparables in the area. And again, if it's a 3-bed, 2-bath that you're looking to sell, well, I think it's a mile or maybe 5-mile radius, you might check to see what those 3-bed and 2-baths sold for. That's going to give you basically a good estimate of what your property's worth. With the multifamily, though, is based on the NOI, the net operating income. So it's based on basically the amount of rent that you're able to get, and the expenses that you have leaves you with your NOI. And you dictate both, right? The market might shift a little bit based on, how much rent you can get, but you can definitely help on the expense side, hey, I don't know why we're paying this much on trash. Let's look for, and you're really good at that, actually. Let's look for a different company to do it with. Oh, saves an extra $20. Okay, that $20 goes a long way every month, right? So being able to control the value of it when you're looking to sell, I think is the most appealing piece of it all for me, outside of the cash flow. I'm all about cash flow, though.
I think my job here is done.
Yes, you've done well. You've done well. You've done well.
I'm going to take credit for that one.
Yes, exactly. No, I agree. And I think, do you invest for appreciation or do you invest for cash flow, or both?
Appreciation is cherry on top for me.
Yes.
I don't. So when we started buying in Alabama, 2019, they did not appreciate as much, nor did I care for that as much. It was more of like, how much is this building going to bring? Great, I'm going to make extra $100,000 a year. That's wonderful. I'm going to buy it, and if it appreciates, I'm not going to cry about that. It's interesting, that article that just came out with Forbes.
Shout out! Whoa. We can't just skim over that. All right. Nelia was just in the Forbes magazine talking about real estate, doing her thing. So, no, we can't just gloss over that. That's a big deal. Forbes is a big deal. Congrats to that.
Thank you. It was interesting. They quoted me on, I can't remember what I said. I think, I don't care for appreciation.
Yep.
People gave me so much shit on that one at work.
I bet. But they
I was like,
didn't get it.
Did you even bother reading the
rest
whole
of
thing?
it.
Do you even know what that means? Like, oh, come on, people. I don't care for appreciation. If it appreciates, that's
It's
wonderful.
plus.
But I'm not going to bet on it, is what I meant. But,
Yes.
they're going to twist your words.
Of course,
and
of course.
say whatever. So that was interesting. What was I going to ask you? Where were we going with this?
Because I asked you about appreciation and cash flow. Now, why is cash flow so important then?
Again, call me lazy. It is. I eventually want to retire. Well, I did retire. Remember back in June for like 5 minutes?
Yeah.
I was like, maybe that's not a good idea. So I think January I came back. I was able to transition right back into where I left off. And I don't want to do that again. But for cash flow, it's eventually when I do retire, I want to be able to live off of that money, have that passive income.
No, that's where I'm at as well. I think cash flow is extremely important. Being able to have those quarterly checks, those monthly checks, and you dictate that because you own the properties, right? On how you take your distributions. But I think cash flow is everything. I think cash flow gets you through COVID. if you're fortunate enough to be in a state that didn't have any issues as far as for paying rents and different things like that, but it allows you to still be getting a check regardless of what you're doing. I think that's huge. Now, I was going to ask you something else based on cash flow appreciation, but what dictates what markets you want to get into? Are there any other markets that you want to get into?
I am looking at other markets. The biggest thing I usually pay attention to is who, in terms of employers, is coming to town. Is this state, city, whatever, good at attracting them and keeping them happy, these employers? Because if these employers stay in that place, that means they're going to build, or they're going to hire more people. That means we're going to need more housing. You know, I might take it a little too far, but I like to overanalyze things to death.
Nothing wrong with that.
And so I pay attention to who's coming to town, how many jobs are they bringing, what kind of jobs are they. That will dictate what type of buildings I will buy. There's a couple other areas I'm looking at. I think we talked about Columbus, Ohio, because of the microchip factory that they're bringing there. And I heard Amazon is going to be building, I can't remember, they just bought a lot of land. Even the mayor doesn't know what the hell they're going to do with it, but speculation is it's going to be a warehouse.
Okay.
So
in Columbus?
In Columbus.
I like the Midwest in general, right? I talk about being in Chicago, and now, some of their renting laws are, they are what they are, but I have a team of people that I trust out there. But I like the Midwest, and it's been funny because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, every day, at least an hour and a half dedicated to podcasts while I'm working out and different things like that, real estate podcasts. And, over the last year or so, all I heard was, stay out the Midwest. You don't want to go to the markets that are cheap. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. There's a lot of perspectives on how to invest. But what I found interesting was over the last 6 months, though, everyone was like, man, the Midwest was the more stable market of all the markets over the last, 12 months because they didn't necessarily go up in value, crazy value. So that means they didn't swing, the pendulum didn't swing as far on the other side as well, as far as for the value of the properties going down. But you got a steady, consistent rent growth. You had a steady, consistent cash flow. I know I didn't have any issues with any of my properties during COVID or anything like that were in the Midwest as well. So it's just interesting. So talking about Columbus, Ohio, I think that could be a really good market based on what you just said. And I think what scares people as well is because people don't travel to those states for vacation and different things like that, which is fine. But as long as there's people that are working there, their jobs are there, doesn't matter.
That's a really good point you bring out, by the way. A lot of the people that come to me, like as an investor, hey, I want to invest, can you help me buy? They look at these properties as if they were going to live in them.
That's the worst thing to do.
You don't need Sub-Zero refrigerator when you're charging $1,500 a month. It's like, take a deep breath, calm down. Like, they don't need granite countertops. Yes, fix things up. Yes, paint things up. Put new floors in there. But it can be builder grade. It doesn't have to be luxurious item.
I think that's the one part. So it's funny you say that. So my wife and I, we do spec homes as well, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we do spec homes, and that was one of the things like I had to keep reminding her is like, hey babe, this is not our house. So we don't need the $15,000 chandelier. Right? Like don't get me wrong. We're still in the luxury market, so there's things that you do want to put in there that makes sense. The Wolf appliances and different things like that. But certain things you don't necessarily need to spend, and you have to be able to separate personal and business when it comes down to that. And so that's always a conversation that even on some of our rentals, I'm scared to ask my wife, hey babe, can you go to the rental and kind of write some things down that you think we need to upgrade? Oh, you need to upgrade the fridge. You need to upgrade this. You need to. I'm like, no, babe, we're only getting $1,500 for this. Like, why would I go spend another $20,000 on upgrades, and it's going to take me 2.5 years to make that back? So I think as an investor, being able to differentiate personal and business from that perspective, I think is huge.
My husband's a little bit like that too. Now that I think about it, he's like, we have to do. I'm like, no, we don't.
Exactly. And again, we're not talking about being slumlords or anything like that.
No,
we're just being reasonable in expectations. Again, if you're getting $1,500 a month, these people, like folks aren't expecting, top end, type of thing. Now, if you're getting $5,000 a month, okay,
It's a different story.
it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And understanding that, I think, is huge, and you can't take it personal. Here's something I've realized with investing in general, especially being all in when we're buying, some of these multifamily properties, especially when we're doing value add, is when you work your perform out, that's one thing. But things never go the way you expect them to go.
Yes, yes.
And I realized that you always have to have a reserve.
Exactly.
Now, with the reserve piece of it, what do you typically earmark for reserves, even though you're hoping you don't have to use them, but it's always good to have? Is there an amount that you put aside?
So I have about 6 months worth of reserves. Yes, tenants paid their rent, but God forbid, like COVID happened.
Yes.
One of my buildings that I bought was December 2019. We went under lockdown March 2020. So
yeah.
literally 3 months in, I out of 24 units that I had in that building, only 6 tenants were paying. That damn building brought me to my knees.
Ugh, that's
Audrey,
brutal.
our property manager,
Yeah.
called me and she's like, maybe it's time you sell this place. I can't sell it. We have to make this work. I'm like, I can't sell it. We have
Yeah.
to make this work. So it sucked me, bled me dry. And, we paid for things. We paid for mortgage. We paid for, my mortgage was due. My taxes were due. My utilities were due. They wanted their water. They wanted their lights. Like, I couldn't just shut things down at the end of the day.
So 2018, 2019 is when I was buying my little condos and stuff like that. And then 2020 is where I got the epiphany and like, okay, I want to transition to multifamily, but we're in COVID, we're in lockdown, So I'm doing my research, but I wasn't in the game yet. So COVID drops, and you talk about you bought a building in November?
December 2019, end of December is when I bought it.
Whew. So was there any regrets? What was the emotions that were tied into buying that? But that wasn't your first multifamily though at that time.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It was my first out of state.
Oh, even worse. So first out of state, COVID happens. Talk through kind of the expenses that came with that and how you got through it, honestly, because it sounds like a lot of money.
You really want to talk about it? We're all going to cry by the time this is all.
Sounds like
that damn place brought me to my knees. I won't lie to you. I had a nervous breakdown.
Really?
Yeah. At one point, Paul, our real estate agent, he's like, maybe you should just evict everybody and board it up. I was like, what? No, that's not an option. Because the windows kept breaking windows. Like, the homeless would move. I mean, you name it, I had it. It was ridiculous. Drug dealers, prostitution. I was like, for Pete's sake, everybody just stop misbehaving. Like, can you just stop? And I couldn't do anything. My hands were tied. Evictions weren't allowed. Cops weren't traveling around to kick out prostitutes and drug dealers. So it was just a freaking nightmare. So how did we do it? I had to be the cheerleader. At the end, I ended up losing my marbles.
Yeah, that's tough. But even so, let's talk about on the expense side, right? You talk about mortgage, you talk about property tax, you talk about insurance. Like, if you weren't well off, as I guess not even well off personally, but business wise or whatever, like most people crumble in that situation, right? Because if you don't have any reserves or even money to put back into it to weather the storm. But I think the most scariest part is like not having a finish line, not knowing when this is going to end.
We didn't know it. The only gracing thing that I had, we both knew. I mean, thank God my husband was around to keep me together.
Yeah.
But I knew with it being red states, they weren't going to put up with the whole eviction moratorium for too much longer. It lasted 3 months in there. 3 months later, they lifted it. But the sheriff's office was backed up.
For 3
so
months,
now you're waiting 3 more months. Now you're 6 months into it.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
And now you're waiting even longer for sheriff to show up to set everybody's things out. So it took a while, but it's my best performing asset. And 2 years, I haven't had any vacancy, knock on wood.
Knock on wood, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. So speak on this piece of it real quick as well. Even like, because people knock on D assets, of course, because obviously there's more that goes into them. C or D class assets, C class assets. Everybody wants to be in the A class assets, which has its own issues in itself. But talk about this, because one of the things that I thought was pretty cool from our conversations is, I mean, we're buying C plus, turning them to B minuses, or B minuses turning them to B plus assets. It's kind of the sandbox that we play in. But what I thought was cool one time was, you was like, yeah, the sheriff even stopped by and told you guys, like, thanked you guys.
Yes. Yeah, it was the city actually that called me. It was a place that I owned down south here, that 13 unit with the, like,
Yeah.
nobody wanted to touch it with the 10-foot pole. No lender, no hard money lender wanted to touch me.
Wow.
It was that bad. Once I turned it around after 3 months, city called me up, City Hall. She's like, I just wanted to thank you. You turned this building around. I was like, what? Who's calling me? Like, is this like a prank call? What are we doing? No, they were like, I turned that, like, everybody thought it was bad part of town. It was because of my building.
Wow. But see, like, to me, that sounds like sometimes you got to do things that most, like, you have to have a vision for it, but sometimes you got to do things that most people don't want to do, right? Or don't even see. Because in order to take a building that needs that much work, it's kind of a eyesore in the community. People think, it probably breeds violence and everything else, but you took it, changed it up, renovated, got new tenants in there, changed up that whole outlook of that building in particular. And that actually changed up the whole outlook of that community, that city, right? So to me, that goes with kind of a principle that I kind of live by is, sometimes you got to be willing to take a chance, and you got to be able to take a chance that most people aren't willing to take.
And I think the most important thing with that is make sure you have the great team behind you.
Yes.
That will be able to take you to that finish line. Because I knew my contractors are solid. I mean, we had foundation issues too. I wasn't scared of anything that came up on the inspection because I knew I had the right people in place. When I said jump, they say how high.
Yeah.
That's usually what it is.
That's perfect. And that's something I learned from you too, is the team piece of it, but more so than anything too, like teammates that can be molded. Right, teammates that are okay, they're not stuck in their own ways, right? And saying, no, this is just how I'm gonna do it. Like, you've been good, and I've noticed this with our property manager in Alabama. Our team is amazing, but like, you were able to mold them into what you like and how you want your things ran, and very vocal about it, but also making sure that they understand, like, hey, this is how we're going to do things. How important is that for you when you're picking out your teammates?
Very important. I need to make sure that they're trainable. And again, I'm not saying I'm stubborn in my own ways, because there's times when they teach me a thing or two, and I am willing to listen to whatever they have to bring. It was interesting. I remember in one of our monthly meetings, you were on a call, my husband was on a call, I was on a call. It wasn't performing so well. We had vacancies. It was when we were doing our value add. Like, I can't remember if they weren't fixing things fast enough. Something was happening.
Yeah, turnover.
And you both kind of like went a little hard at him. And I'm sitting there listening. I'm like, there's no way in hell I would want to deal with any of this bullshit. So I hopped on a plane a week later.
Yes, I remember
I
that.
got them all spa gift cards for the girls. And I got, I think we bought them, for the guys we bought.
What did we do?
Gift cards, Visa cards, or something.
For them to go,
it was something small, took them all for lunch, hugged them, kissed them. We didn't talk about any problems that were there. They killed it following month.
Oh, they crushed it.
Things were like fixed, things were done. I'm like, that's how I want to be treated, right?
And I stole that from you, because that's exactly what I do with all my property managers and my stuff in Chicago in particular, is because at the end of the day, I relate a lot of real estate stuff to football and the team concept of football. Like, I don't care what position you play, you need the next person next to you to be able to have success, to be able to move the ball down the field, right? It's no different with real estate. You need to make sure that those people that are on your team understand their value and feel appreciated, that they're not just a worker. They're a part of your team to make you move forward. And I've taken that from you. So I make sure, one, sometimes you got to be stern, but I'm always making sure that they understand that I appreciate them, that they're very valuable to me. Whenever I meet with them, we're going to always go to dinner. We're going to do something to show my appreciation. And then holiday season rolls around. I want to make sure that at a minimum, you're getting some sort of gift from me to, again, show my appreciation, because I also understand that I can't get any of this done without you guys. I can't get any of it done without any of my teammates to get to where I want to go. So that's a thing that I just learned in football, and I did the same exact thing when I was playing ball. Like, I don't care if you were the janitor or the GM, everybody's going to get some sort of small gift from me, right? In particular, the guys that people don't focus on, whether it's the janitors, whether it's the first-time trainers or whatever, like making sure that they feel appreciated, because people tend to go harder for you when they feel appreciated. And you're not buying anything, you're not buying their love or their loyalty. It's just more of a, like, I genuinely appreciate.
I see you, I appreciate you. That's all they want to know. Yeah. In fact, when I went back, when we did our refinance, I think appraiser was coming through. There were a few things that were laying around that weren't finished. That evening, I was in town. Al, one of our landscapers, was like, honey, don't worry. I'll stay late tonight. I'll get things done. I remember you sent me that $100 gift card. I was like, damn, that was 9 months ago. But he remembered it. You never know how you're going to make somebody feel special.
And it's extremely, extremely important for people to just understand that, you can't, another football analogy is, you can't move the ball down the field without the other 10 guys, right? It's the same thing in real estate. You can't get far without your teammates being able to play their role and doing what they say they're going to do, but you got to make sure that they understand that you appreciate them, because at the end of the day, they're doing this for your dreams and your goals.
It's your problems, that they're trying to fix
they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, 100%. Quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you involve your kids in anything?
Yes. So I take my kids to see all my sites. The only one they haven't been to is Huntsville yet. But I try to keep them involved as much as possible. I mean, my son's 11 and my youngest is 7, but like on our spec homes that we build here, I try to take them and teach them as much as I can that they can understand it. But I definitely try to keep them involved, because, and my whole goal with that is, with my kids, is exposure, right? Showing them different avenues. I said this recently, I was an athlete. They seen that firsthand. They seen the work that went into it. They didn't necessarily understand it, but they seen it. Seeing me do some of the media stuff, I would take them to, when I was doing, I had my own radio show, I would take them to the studio with me just to see, and, okay, this is cool space. This stuff exists, right? And now in real estate, the same exact thing. I try to make sure that they see what's going on, see that I'm not sitting on my hands. I'm not doing anything. And exposure. Again, these are 3 different avenues that someday they might be part of. You never know.
Yeah. We did that with our kids. I would bring like rental applications after showings and then explain to them what we look for. That, we qualify tenants based on, credit, based on how much they make. Let's say the rent is $1,000. They have to make $3,000 a month. And they would sit there and analyze it. They don't care anymore.
Yeah. But knowing it, though, because you just don't know when that will be applicable in their life, right? Man, I remember Mom telling me about credit. Oh, okay, this is what credit's about, making sure you're, and I was telling my oldest son, he's like, Dad, what is credit? Credit is basically showing that you're a man of your words. You know what I'm saying? Like that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. Yeah. You're going to pay this stuff back. They loaned you $100. They expect you to pay it back within this, this amount of time. Now there's this thing called interest too, that is in your best interest actually to pay that off faster than not. But so just the wording and the vernacular that goes with it, because you being from another country, my folks being from another country, like these are not things that I was privy to growing up. So as I'm learning them as a 30-year-old. Well, I want to make sure that learning curve for my kids is a little bit shorter. Now, what they do with the information is on them, but long as I'm giving it to them, I think that's the number one thing, is making sure that they at least know it. You know what I mean? And hopefully they figure it out from there. Yeah.
If you were to give your 18-year-old self an advice, what would it be?
I like that one. I like I said, I listen to a lot of podcasts and everybody says the same things. Like, man, I should have started earlier. I should have started earlier, which is one of the things. I should have started earlier. But I think if I could tell my 18-year-old self, besides starting earlier in the real estate game, it would be to enjoy the process.
Oh, okay.
Enjoy the process. Because in football in particular, like you have to have short-term memory. Which is good and bad, right? Because if you make a bad play on the field, you got to kind of forget about it and move on. Make a good play on the field, you got to forget about it and move on, which is good in life. And I kind of move like that in life as well. But I didn't, in having that mindset and having blinders on, I didn't enjoy the process of being in the league. I didn't enjoy the process of what I was able to do collectively. It wasn't until COVID where I sat back and was like, dang, you played 10 years in the NFL? Like, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Like, but when you're in it, you don't have time to kind of sit and think about it, right? Or, even stats and different things like that. Like my brother, who has been there every step of the way with me, he can tell me how many times I've sacked whoever. Like, he's all in. But like, I never kept up with that type of stuff. So it was like, hey, bro, I didn't realize I sacked Aaron Rodgers 7 times. He's like, duh, it was 7.5 actually. You know what I mean? So like, but being able to sit back and like, these guys are all Hall of Famers and different things like that. Being able to sit back and be like, man, I wish I would have appreciated the process a little bit more. But then maybe you get content if you do that. I don't know. You know what I mean? You never know.
Interesting. What's one book you would recommend? Oh, books you could recommend for listeners?
Wow, I like that one too. The book that I recommend to everybody is Rich Dad Poor Dad. Anybody that's new to investing or wants to get into investing, I would say Rich Dad Poor Dad is probably the number one book. I try to read that at least once a year.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it's funny because, if you read something when you're 22 years old and you read something at 30, you read the same exact thing, but it means two different things to you now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I try to read it every year. But I want to ask you the same thing. If you were, if there was a book to recommend, what would that book be?
So I just read Breaking the Habits of Being Yourself.
Ooh.
Joe Dispenza.
Yes.
My son called me. He's in film school a week ago, and he's like, I'm doing this project. He's learning teamwork and all that stuff, and they're not listening. Diarrhea amount of frustration coming out of him. I said, Nathan, I'm going to send this book to you. I just want you to read one chapter. So you're telling me all I have to do is change my mindset and things just going to magically happen. Typical teenager.
That's exactly what I'm telling you, actually.
I'm like, read one chapter. He's fighting me like there's no tomorrow. Monday it arrived at 3 a.m. his time. He goes, oh my God, I just read Introduction. I really, really like it.
Wow.
Then he called me the next day. He goes, I read 20 pages in. I might have to go back and reread it. He takes it on a different level of like, it's all in our head, essentially, is what it is.
It is. I agree. And I think, as our final words, I guess, I think that's huge, though. Mindset is everything. And how you believe, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about the journey that you're on, what you believe about things around you dictate how you move. You know what I mean? And your experiences play a big role. And I think you learn from your experiences, good or bad, you learn from them. But your mindset is huge. And if you believe you can do something, I'm a firm believer of, if you believe you can do something, you can do it. Now, are you willing to put the work in to do it? That's the next step. But mindset
we
is
don't
everything.
have to go far. I came from a flipping village and look like how far I've gotten. And I keep telling my kids, I'm like, trust me, it's all in your head. Look at where I come from, not speaking a word of English, coming here at age 19. I mean, I should be having a pretty damn thick accent to begin with. And then having my ways of like, this is how we did it in my country, being able to adapt. I don't know, maybe I'm just got...
No. That's a real thing, because my parents experienced the same exact thing. Coming from a different... my mom and dad came from a third world country in Haiti. Came to the States in the 80s, didn't speak the language, had to learn it. They do still have a thick accent, but their trajectory changed completely, right? And I just think, again, mindset is everything, and what you believe of yourself is what you are. You know what I mean? If you
100%.
don't believe highly of yourself, then that's what you are. So that's awesome. I do appreciate that. I think we need to do more of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Just talk through real estate and everything that comes with it. I think that's
Absolutely.
huge.
Thank you so much for doing this and
No, thank
agreeing.
you.
And
No, this is great.
if anybody has any hot deals, how do they get a hold of you?
Yes, anybody got hot deals, please. At my TikTok is more real estate stuff, but it's at Cliff Avril, CliffAvril, or you could email me, Cliff at Cliff. Do I want to give that out? Actually,
No.
never mind. But at Cliff Avril, DM me on Instagram or TikTok. What about yourself?
Same thing on Instagram at Nelyac, Nelyac.
Yes. Nellie's crushing it. She's definitely the
Thank you.
one to know, and I'm definitely appreciative that you're my partner.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
we'll
you so
look to build
much.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.